The Ghuzz or Turkmen, also known as Oghuzes, a linguistic term designating the Western Turkic or Oghuz languages from the Oggur subdivision of Turkic language family, were a historical Turkic tribal confederation conventionally named the Oghuz Yabgu State in Central Asia during the early medieval period. The name Oghuz is a common Turkic word for tribe. The Oghuz Confederation migrated westward from the Jeti-su area after a conflict with the Karluk branch of Uigurs. The founders of the Ottoman Empire were descendants of the Oghuz Yabgu State. Today the residents of Turkey, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Gagauzia and Iranian Azerbaijan are descendants of Oghuz Turks, and their language belongs to the Oghuz, a.k.a. southwestern Turkic, group of the Turkic languages family. In the 800s, the Oghuzes from the Aral steppes drove Bechens from the Emba and Ural River region toward the west. In the 900s, they inhabited the steppe of the rivers Sari-su, Turgai, and Emba to the north of Lake Balkhash of modern-day Kazakhstan. A clan of this nation, the Seljuks, embraced Islam and in the 1000s entered Persia, where they founded the Great Seljuk Empire. Similarly, in the 1000s, a Tengriist Oghuz clan referred to as Uzes or Turks in the Russian chronicles overthrew Pecheneg supremacy in the Russian steppe. Harried by another Turkic horde, the Kipchuks, these Oghuz penetrated as far as the lower Danube, crossed it and invaded the Balkans, where they were either crushed or struck down by an outbreak of plague, causing the survivors either to flee or to join the Byzantine imperial forces as mercenaries. 1065. The Oghuz seem to have been related to the Pechenegs, some of whom were clean-shaven and others of whom had small goatee beards. According to the book Attila and the Nomad Hordes, like the Kimaks, they set up many carved wooden funerary statues surrounded by simple stone Babel monoliths. The authors of the book go on to note that those Uzes or Turks who settled along the Russian frontier were gradually Slavicized, though they also played a leading role as cavalry in 1100 and early 1200-era Russian armies, where they were known as Black Hats. Oghuz warriors served in almost all Islamic armies of the Middle East from the 1000s onwards, in Byzantium from the 800s, and even in Spain and Morocco. In later centuries, they adapted and applied their own traditions and institutions to the ends of the Islamic world and emerged as empire builders with a constructive sense of statecraft. Linguistically, the Oghuz are listed together with the Old Kimaks of the Middle Yenisei of the Obi, the Old Kipchuks who later emigrated to southern Russia, and the modern Kyrgyz in one particular Turkic group, distinguished from the rest by the mutation of the initial Y sound to J. The term Oghuz was gradually supplanted among the Turks themselves by Turkmen, Turkmen, from the mid-900s on, a process which was completed by the beginning of the 1200s. The Ottoman dynasty, who gradually took over Anatolia after the fall of the Seljuks, toward the end of the 1200s, led an army that was also predominantly Oghuz. In 178 to 177 BC, the Xiongnu Shanyu Maotun subdued a people called Huqi, west of Wusun in modern-day Mongolia. The early pronunciation of this transliteration suggests that they were ancestors of Oghur/Oghuz. Ahead of Dede Korkut in Baku. The original homeland of the Oghuz, like other Turks, was the Ural-Altai region of Central Asia, which has been the domain of Turkic peoples since antiquity. Although their mass migrations from Central Asia occurred from the 800s onwards, they were present in areas west of the Caspian Sea centuries prior, although smaller in numbers and perhaps living with other Turks. For example, the Book of Dede Korkut, the historical epic of the Oghuz Turks, was written from the 800s and 900s. According to many historians, the usage of the word Oghuz is dated back to the advent of the Huns, 220 BC. The title of Oghuz, Oghuz Khan, was given to Maotun, the founder of the Xiongnu Empire, which is often considered the first Turkic political entity in Central Asia. Also in the 2nd century BC, a Turkic tribe called Oghuz or Uyuki, who were described as a western enemy of the Huns, referred to in Chinese sources, Shiji, 110 and Suishu, 84, were mentioned in the area of the Irtysh River, in present-day Lake Zazan. The Greek sources used the name Ufai, or Uvai, to describe the Oghuz Turks, a name they had also used to describe the Huns centuries earlier. Citation needed. A number of tribal groupings bearing the name Oghuz, often with a numeral representing the number of united tribes in the union, are noted. The mention of the 6 Oghuz tribal union in the Turkic or Hun inscriptions, 500s, pertains to the unification of the 6 Turkic tribes which became known as the Oghuz. This was the first written reference to Oghuz, and was dated to the period of the Göktürk Empire. The Oghuz community gradually grew larger, uniting more Turkic tribes prior and during the Göktürk establishment. Prior to the Göktürk state, there are references to the 8 Oghuz, 8 Oghuz, and the 9 Oghuz, 9 Oghuz, union. The Oghuz Turks under 8 Oghuz and the 9 Oghuz state formations ruled different areas in the vicinity of the Altai Mountains. During the establishment of the Göktürk state, Oghuz tribes inhabited the Altai mountain region and also lived in northeastern areas of the Altai Mountains along the Tula River. They were also present as a community near the Karluk River in present-day northern Mongolia. Their main homeland and domain in the ensuing centuries was the area of Transoxiana, in western Turkestan. This land became known as the Oghuz steppe, which is an area between the Caspian and Aral seas. Ibn al-Athir, an Arab historian, declared that the Oghuz Turks had come to Transoxiana in the period of the Caliph al-Mahdi in the years between 775 and 785. In the period of the Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun, 813–833, the name Oghuz starts to appear in the works of Islamic writers. By 780, the eastern parts of the Sir Daria were ruled by the Karluk Turks and the western region, Oghuz steppe, was ruled by the Oghuz Turks. The militarism that the Oghuz empires were very well known for was rooted in their centuries-long nomadic lifestyle. In general, they were a herding society which possessed certain military advantages that sedentary societies did not have, particularly mobility. Alliances by marriage and kinship, and systems of social distance based on family relationships were the connective tissues of their society. In Oghuz traditions, society was simply the result of the growth of individual families. But such a society also grew by alliances and the expansion of different groups, normally through marriages. The shelter of the Oghuz tribes was a tent-like dwelling, erected on wooden poles and covered with skin, felt, or hand-woven textiles, which is called a yurt. Their cuisine included yani, stew, kebabs, toyga or bas, lit. Wedding soup, a soup made from wheat flour and yogurt, kmz, a traditional drink of the Turks, made from fermented horse milk, pekme, a syrup made of boiled grape juice, and helva made with wheat starch or rice flour, tutmak, noodle soup, yufka, flattened bread, katmer, layered pastry, chorak, ring-shaped buns, bread, clotted cream, cheese, milk, and ayran, diluted yogurt beverage, as well as wine. Social order was maintained by emphasizing correctness in conduct as well as ritual and ceremony. Ceremonies brought together the scattered members of the society to celebrate birth, puberty, marriage, and death. Such ceremonies had the effect of minimizing social dangers and also of adjusting persons to each other under controlled emotional conditions. Patrilineally related men and their families were regarded as a group with rights over a particular territory and were distinguished from neighbors on a territorial basis. Marriages were often arranged among territorial groups so that neighboring groups could become related, but this was the only organizing principle that extended territorial unity. Each community of the Oghuz Turks was thought of as part of a larger society composed of distant as well as close relatives. This signified tribal allegiance. Wealth and materialistic objects were not commonly emphasized in Oghuz society and most remained herders, and when settled they would be active in agriculture. Status within the family was based on age, gender, relationships by blood, or marriageability. Males as well as females were active in society, yet men were the backbones of leadership and organization. According to the Book of Deed Korkut, which demonstrates the culture of the Oghuz Turks, women were expert horse riders, archers, and athletes. The elders were respected as repositories of both secular and spiritual wisdom. Homeland in Transoxiana. In the 700s, the Oghuz Turks made a new home and domain for themselves in the area between the Caspian and Aral seas, a region that is often referred to as Transoxiana, the western portion of Turkestan. They had moved westward from the Altai Mountains, passing through the Siberian steppes, and settled in this region, and also penetrated into southern Russia and the Volga from their bases in West China. In the 1000s, the Oghuz Turks adopted Arabic script, after being initially illiterate. In his accredited work titled Diwan Lugat al-Turk, Mahmud of Kashgar, a Turkic scholar of the 1000s, described the Karashuk Mountains, which are located just east of the Aral Sea, as the original homeland of the Oghuz Turks. The Karashuk Mountains are now known as the Tengriist, Tian Shan in Chinese, mountains, and they are adjacent to Sir Darya. The extension from the Karashuk Mountains towards the Caspian Sea, Transoxiana, was called the Oghuz steppe lands, from where the Oghuz Turks established trading, religious and cultural contacts with the Abbasid Arab Caliphate, who ruled to the south. This is around the same time that they first converted to Islam and renounced their Tengriism belief system. The Arab historians mentioned that the Oghuz Turks in their domain in Transoxiana were ruled by a number of kings and chieftains. It was in this area that they later founded the Seljuk Empire, and it was from this area that they spread west into Western Asia and Eastern Europe during Turkic migrations from the 800s until the 1100s. The founders of the Ottoman Empire were also Oghuz Turks. The Uruk, also Uruks, or Uruks, are a Turkic people ultimately of Oghuz descent, some of whom are still semi-nomadic, primarily inhabiting the mountains of Anatolia and partly Balkan Peninsula. Their name derives from the Old Turkic verb from Eastern Turkish dialect, Kagate dialect, Yorumek, but Western Turkish dialect, Garbi Turks, Yurumek in infinitive, which means to walk, with the word Yoruk or Uruk designating those who walk, walkers. The Yoruk to this day appear as a distinct segment of the population of Macedonia and Thrace, where they settled as early as the 1300s. While today the Yoruk are increasingly settled, many of them still maintain their nomadic lifestyle, breeding goats and sheep in the Taurus Mountains and further eastern parts of Mediterranean regions, in southern Anatolia, in the Pindus, Epirus, Greece, and southern Albania, the Ar Mountains, Republic of Macedonia, the Piran and Rhodope Mountains, Bulgaria, and Dobruja. Citation needed. An earlier offshoot of the Yoruks, the Kailars or Kalar Turks, were amongst the first Turkish colonists. In Europe, Kailar or Kalar being the Turkish name for the Greek town of Ptolemaido, which took its current name in 1928, formerly inhabiting parts of the Greek regions of Thessaly and Macedonia. Settled Yoruks could be found until 1923, especially near and in the town of Kozani. The Yoruks are credited with the conversion to Islam in the 1700s, after a period of cohabitation, of a part of the native Meglan Vlachs of Greece. Citation needed. Who in 1923 were expelled to Turkey under the terms of the population exchange between the two countries. The terms Turkmen and Turkmen were often used as a designation for the Muslim Oghuz Turks, Azerbaijanis, Turks of Turkey, Central Asian Turks, in periods of history, although other Turkic factions described as Turks, Cumans, Hazars, Uigurs, etc., and the ethnic name that the modern Turkmens of Central Asia used to designate their nationality was formed later. Although a term most commonly used for the Oghuz of Central Asia, the name Turkmen or Turkmen once applied to Azerbaijanis and the Turks of Turkey as well, distinguishing between other Turks and non-Muslim Turks. Some Western books which were written prior to the modern age use the terms Turkmen for the descendants of the Oghuz Turks who were not from the Turkmen nationality of Central Asia, which is one of the branches of the Oghuz. For example, many sources prior to the modern age claim that the largest component of the population of Azerbaijan is composed of Turkmen tribes. The Turkmen reference in history books, which is often used for Azerbaijanis and Turks of Turkey, simply means Muslim Turk or Muslim Western Turk, which means Oghuz Turk. According to the Encyclopaedia Britannica, the name Turkmen is a synonym of Oghuz. Turkish historian Yilmaz Ostuna presents almost the same definition of the name Turkmen. He labels the Turkmen Oghuz or Western Turkish populations as Ottomans, Azerbaijan, and Turkmen, Turkmenistan. In Turkey, the word Turkmen refers to nomadic Turkish tribes, all Muslims, some of whom still continue this lifestyle. Literature. Oghuz Turkish literature includes the famous Book of Dede Korkut, which was UNESCO's 2000 Literary Work of the Year, as well as the Oghuzname and Krolu epics, which are part of the literary history of Azerbaijanis, Turks of Turkey and Turkmens. The modern and classical literature of Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Central Asia are also considered Oghuz literature, since it was produced by their descendants. The Book of Dede Korkut is an invaluable collection of epics and stories, bearing witness to the language, the way of life, religions, traditions, and social norms of the Oghuz Turks in Azerbaijan, Turkey and Central Asia.